Sergeant Leo Callahan's boots clanked heavily against the grated floor of Station Erebus as he shuffled down the narrow corridor, every muscle in his body aching like he'd been personally wrestled by a black hole. The overhead lights flickered with their usual half-hearted enthusiasm, casting sickly shadows that stretched and twisted like lazy ghosts. Another double patrol shift done, another night of microwaved rations and dreams haunted by malfunctioning mech suits. He tapped the access panel to his quarters, the door sliding open with a grumpy hiss. Leo had exactly one goal for the evening: collapse on his bunk and pretend he didn't exist. Maybe dream of something nice, like a beach on old Earth or a pizza bigger than a reactor core. Instead, he found a stranger sitting on his bed. She looked up at him, mid-bite of what appeared to be one of his protein bars, the ones he'd been hoarding like precious gems because the supply officer kept losing shipments. Her silver hair spilled down her shoulders in an effortless tumble, and her long, pointed ears twitched slightly, like sensitive antennae adjusting to a signal. For a moment, Leo thought he'd finally snapped. Maybe the radiation from Deck 9 had finally fried his brain. Maybe this was a hallucination conjured by too many nutrient-deficient meals and exactly 0 days off in 8 months. He said brilliantly. The stranger chewed thoughtfully and swallowed. Is this not the recycling bay? She asked in a voice so melodic it could have sold out concert halls had she not been holding his last caramel-flavored ration bar hostage. Leo blinked, then blinked again. This is my room, he said, every word dragged painfully into existence. The alien woman, because what else could she be, blinked her wide silver-flecked eyes, as if only now processing this information. She looked around, taking in the cramped bunk bed, the sad excuse for a desk piled with half-finished maintenance reports, and the little hand-drawn calendar counting down the days until Leo's hypothetical leave, a number that cruelly only seemed to increase. I see, she said gravely. Then, with no sign of apology or shame, she patted the bed beside her. You may share. I am small. Leo, a man trained to remain calm under artillery fire, found himself momentarily speechless. He took a step back into the hallway, checked the room number on the door, 47B, just like always, and then cautiously stepped back inside, half expecting her to vanish like a dream. Instead, she remained stubbornly real, nibbling on the corner of the ration wrapper with a contented hum. Look, Miss, Alien Lady, Leo said, trying to wrestle his brain back into command. You can't just, people don't. He gave up and gestured wildly at her in the universal human sign for explain yourself before I call security. The alien tilted her head. Her long ears twitched again, adorably, like a cat picking up on a distant sound. I am Sira of the Tathari, she said grandly, thumping her chest with a small, proud fist. Navigator, traveler, occasional accidental recycler. Leo opened his mouth to argue, but the words died before they even had a chance. There was something so utterly earnest about her, like a child caught stealing cookies, but completely convinced she was allowed. Right, Leo muttered. Tathari, of course. Should have known. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Somewhere in the universe, a cosmic entity was laughing at him. The rational part of his brain suggested politely but firmly that he should call station security, report the breach, and let someone higher up the chain deal with it. Preferably someone with fewer coffee stains on their uniform and more training in alien diplomacy. But another, much stupider part of his brain, the part that hadn't had a real conversation outside of mission briefings in months, hesitated. Because the woman, Sira, wasn't threatening. If anything, she looked more curious than dangerous. And frankly, Leo had been trained to recognize dangerous things. Plasma guns, rogue AI drones, tax audits. Sira didn't fit the list. She noticed his hesitation and pounced like a starved velociraptor sensing weakness. You seem reasonable, she said, scooting over to make more room on the bunk. Perhaps you will allow me to stay until I locate the correct recycling center. I am very tired, very small, harmless. She punctuated this with what Leo assumed was her version of a pitiful smile, although it looked suspiciously like a smug grin. Leo sighed so hard he almost dislocated a lung. Fine, but just for tonight, and you're explaining everything tomorrow, including why your ears look like tactical antennae. Sierra's face lit up like someone had just handed her a lifetime supply of free energy crystals. She immediately lay down, curling into a tiny ball with a speed and efficiency that suggested extensive practice in occupying small spaces. Within seconds, she was snoring, or making some strange alien equivalent, a soft, musical hum that vibrated the bunk slightly. Leo stood there for a long moment, wondering how exactly his life had managed to derail so spectacularly in the span of 3 minutes. He'd survived enemy fire, sabotage attempts, and the time Private Jenkins accidentally vented half the oxygen from the mess hall during pizza night. But this was new. Muttering under his breath, he collapsed into the single chair squeezed between the bunk and the tiny desk, kicking off his boots with a grunt. He stared at Sierra, who now had her hand wrapped possessively around the half-eaten protein bar, like a dragon clutching its hoard. "This is fine," Leo muttered, glaring at the ceiling. "Totally normal. Happens all the time. Random space elf invades your room. No big deal." The ceiling, unhelpfully, offered no advice. He closed his eyes, telling himself he'd figure it all out tomorrow. Maybe he could sneak her back onto her ship. Maybe she'd realize her mistake and leave before anyone noticed. Maybe, Sierra let out a tiny snort in her sleep and muttered something in a language that sounded suspiciously like pillow war imminent. Leo cracked one eye open and shook his head. Yeah, he was doomed, and deep down, a traitorous part of him didn't mind one bit. Morning came slowly on Station Erebus, as it always did, not because of any natural sunrise, but because the station's lighting system had exactly 2 settings: sterile surgical nightmare and overcooked toast. At 0600, the lights flicked on with all the grace of a startled goose, and Leo Callahan groaned, one arm flinging over his eyes like a man warding off the apocalypse. He had slept approximately 3 hours. During that time, he had experienced 2 dreams, one in which his bunk was a diplomatic arena, and he was forced to mediate an argument between his pillow and a sentient mop, and another in which an alien woman with glittering silver eyes kept asking him why humans insisted on putting cheese in tubes. The second dream, tragically, turned out not to be a dream at all. "Your sleep posture is poor," Sierra observed from the bunk. She was seated cross-legged at the foot of it, freshly awake, dressed in a sleek lavender wrap that shimmered slightly and looked far too clean for anything found on this grease-stained station. "I didn't sleep on the bed," Leo grumbled, dragging himself upright, "because you were occupying it like an imperial warlord." "You said I could stay," she replied matter-of-factly, her long ears twitching faintly with amusement. "This implies territory. I have claimed the high ground. You may have the floor in peace." He blinked at her. "Did you just quote a strategy manual? I read your data pad while you slept. Your passwords are not imaginative." Leo's jaw dropped. "You hacked my pad?" "I guessed. Your access code is literally Bacon42. There was a moment of heavy silence during which Leo debated whether to throw himself into the station's trash compactor and be done with it. Unfortunately, the trash compactor had been out of service since the spaghetti incident of 2278, and he didn't want to be remembered that way. Instead, he ran a hand through his hopelessly messy hair and sighed. Okay, we need to talk. Like, proper talk. You're not in the right place, and I could get court-martialed for this. They don't tend to smile on interspecies sleepovers, especially when one of the species isn't registered on the station manifest. Sierra blinked slowly. "I understand. You are afraid." "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Don't be," she replied. "I am very discreet. Also, I rewired your ventilation system to make a cozy nest spot." "Look," she gestured proudly toward the corner of the ceiling, where, to Leo's horror, a small hammock-like structure had been woven out of thermal socks, ration wrappers, and what looked like his extra blanket. It was nestled between 2 ventilation pipes and somehow looked comfortable. "I'm going to get a brain hemorrhage," Leo muttered. "This is it. This is how it happens." "You humans are so dramatic," she said, grinning. "It is only temporary, until I understand where I am. You're on Station Erebus, Earth Federation jurisdiction. You shouldn't be here, Sierra." She tilted her head. "Is this not a neutral zone?" Leo paused. Technically, she had a point. Erebus was considered a multi-species civilian military outpost. But that didn't mean unregistered visitors could stroll in and occupy soldier quarters like they were booking a room at the Hilton Nebula. Still, he didn't want to throw her to the bureaucratic wolves just yet. Something about her unsettled him, not in a bad way, but in a strange, quiet way, like standing near a dormant engine and realizing it might roar to life at any second. She was too calm, too clever, and far too curious to be the harmless space tourist she pretended to be. Leo sat heavily in the chair and rubbed his temples. Fine. First rule, no more rewiring my systems. Second rule, you stay quiet and don't leave the room unless I say it's safe. I'll figure out how to sneak you out, preferably without anyone noticing your ears. Sierra made a face. They are perfectly normal ears. They're like antennas. I'm pretty sure they could pick up galactic radio. She wiggled one experimentally. Only on Thursdays. Leo let out a strangled noise and pointed a finger at her. Stop that. You're very amusing, she said, utterly unbothered. Perhaps I should study you. I'm not a specimen, he said and stood up. I'm a man trying very hard not to get discharged because you took a wrong turn. Sierra folded her arms and arched one elegant brow. Then perhaps we help each other. Excuse me? You need someone to talk to who doesn't speak exclusively in acronyms and military growls. I need a place to avoid questions and protein cube salesmen. Symbiosis. Leo gawked at her. You want to be roommates? Only until I find a suitable new habitat. You have a private bathroom. It is a rare luxury in human constructions. I am willing to trade. Trade what exactly? I can cook. You can cook? I once prepared a ceremonial sunfish for the emissary of Krell. He wept openly. I think that is a sign of culinary success among your people. Leo opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. I don't think that's the bar. No. I will prove it, she said. I found some of your local ingredients in the storage unit. It will be a bonding exercise. Wait, what storage? But it was too late. Sierra was already moving, graceful and efficient, like she'd done this dance 100 times. She pulled out a handful of protein packs, a questionable-looking spice bottle, and something that might have once been a tomato. Leo leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, watching her with deep suspicion and a small, gnawing curiosity. It wasn't the worst morning he'd ever had. That honor still belonged to the time Jenkins accidentally released a cloud of sentient mold in the barracks, and Leo had woken up with a mustache that tried to strangle him. This at least smelled like lunch. The thing about Sierra's cooking, Leo quickly realized, was that it didn't so much follow traditional culinary methods as it did the chaotic laws of particle physics. Ingredients floated through the air in slow, graceful arcs as she tossed them from one hand to the other, her long ears twitching in rhythm like antennae tracking radio waves. Leo stood in the narrow galley kitchen, clutching a fire extinguisher the size of a small torpedo, mentally preparing for the inevitable explosion. So let me get this straight, he said, voice tight. You're blending a protein bar, dehydrated broccoli, 2 mystery spices, and battery acid? Sierra looked up, her face a study in pure innocence. It is not battery acid. It is electrolytic stabilizer. Very nutritious. That's battery acid in a fancier bottle. She shrugged elegantly. Your human labeling conventions are deceptive. Leo pinched the bridge of his nose again, feeling a permanent crease forming there. He thought about stopping her, but curiosity, that reckless old friend, rooted him in place. Besides, Station Erebus already had a standing bet on when the next fire alarm would go off. Maybe he could finally win this month's pool. Sierra, for her part, moved like a professional. She stirred the bubbling mess in a salvaged heating coil with what Leo prayed wasn't one of his missing screwdriver handles. The smell that rose from the pot was alarming. It was both sweet and metallic, like someone had decided to bake a cake inside a malfunctioning reactor. So, tell me, Leo said, trying to distract himself from the impending culinary disaster. How exactly did you end up wandering into my room? Was it part of some grand Tathari mission? Secret spy operation? Really bad Google Maps? Sierra paused, considering. Then she tapped her chin thoughtfully. In truth, it was the coffee machine. Leo stared at her. The coffee machine. Yes, she nodded sagely. Your station's caffeination distribution unit is of considerable renown among deep space travelers. I was curious. However, the signage was unclear. I mistook your room for a coffee sanctuary. Leo snorted. He couldn't help it. You thought my disaster of a bedroom was a sanctuary? She smiled, unbothered. It smelled inviting. Burnt caffeine molecules, engine lubricant, and mild despair. Very authentic. Leo laughed harder than he had in months, doubling over slightly. His ribs ached from it, in the best way. Sierra smiled quietly, clearly pleased with herself, and resumed stirring the mutant stew. Okay, Sierra, Leo said, wiping tears from his eyes. Okay, that's fair. We do have a bit of a derelict pirate ship vibe going around here. I'm impressed you didn't turn right back around. Sierra shrugged. I have slept in less comfortable places. Once I took shelter inside the digestive sac of a molivore worm during a sandstorm. It was squishy. Leo choked on nothing. That's horrifying. Very warm, though. Yeah, I'll stick to cold showers and thin mattresses, thanks. The stew began to make a faint hissing noise. Leo tensed. The fire extinguisher creaked in his hands. Almost ready, Sierra announced brightly, oblivious to the small tendrils of smoke curling from the pot. She rummaged through the drawers and triumphantly produced 2 battered mess trays. With the ceremony of a 5-star chef, she ladled out generous helpings of the steaming, suspiciously glowing stew. Leo eyed his tray like it might sprout legs and attack him. Eat, Sierra commanded, sliding into the tiny fold-out chair opposite him. Her expression was serious. It is good luck. In my experience, food that glows isn't lucky, it's radioactive, Leo muttered. Still, he picked up the battered spork she offered him because somehow it felt like a test, or maybe an invitation. With great reluctance, he took a small, tentative bite. There was a beat of silence, and then another. The stew was edible. Against all odds, it was shockingly edible. Salty, savory, a little tangy, and only mildly metallic, like licking a battery at a gourmet restaurant. Leo blinked at his tray, betrayed by his own taste buds. Holy stars, he said. You're a genius. Sierra beamed, her long ears perking up proudly. I told you. Leo took another bite, more confident now. So what exactly is the plan, Sierra? You can't hide out in my room forever. I mean, the ventilation pipes won't hold you for more than a few days without someone noticing the sock nest. She set down her spork carefully. I have been considering this. Perhaps I could integrate myself into your station society. Leo nearly choked on a chunk of broccoli. You want to blend in? Sierra, you have glowing eyes and antennas for ears. You'll blend in like a neon sign at a ninja convention. I can wear a hat, she said seriously. Leo buried his face in his hands. A hat isn't going to cut it. Sierra leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. I could become your assistant. You are always behind on reports. I could type very quickly. I possess 19 fingers when necessary. Leo peeked at her through his fingers. Please tell me that's a metaphor. She wiggled her hands, still thankfully 5 fingers each. Only sometimes. There was another long pause as Leo processed the image of Sierra with 19 typing fingers, blurring across a keyboard like a caffeinated spider. He shook his head, chuckling. You're impossible. I am adaptable, she corrected, utterly confident. Leo scraped up another spoonful of the questionable stew and leaned back in his chair, watching her. Maybe he was crazy. No, he was definitely crazy. But deep down, something in him, something weary and worn and lonely, didn't want her to leave. All right, Assistant Sierra, he said with mock solemnity. You're hired. But first rule of blending in, no more glowing food. Agreed, she said, smiling with far too many teeth. And just like that, Leo realized he had stumbled into something far stranger and far more dangerous than he could have imagined. Something that, for the first time in years, felt a little bit like adventure. By the 3rd day of harboring an alien fugitive in his room, Leo Callahan began to lose track of what a normal life on Station Erebus looked like. His routine had once been built from the standard-issue dullness of military outpost monotony, breakfast rations shaped like bricks, exercise schedules enforced by shrieking plasma sergeants, and mission briefings so dry they threatened to mummify him on the spot. Now he woke to the sound of humming, Sierra's voice drifting softly from the ceiling vents where she sometimes nested. A haunting tune that sounded like someone had taught a comet to sing opera. He was pretty sure one of the verses included instructions on how to melt titanium, or possibly how to make soup. With her, it was hard to tell. On that particular morning, Leo rolled out of bed, half-dressed, hair sticking up like he'd been hit by a low-voltage lightning bolt, and promptly tripped over a pile of gear that hadn't been there the night before. "Is that a hoverboard?" he asked groggily. Sierra's head popped down from the vent above like a curious bat. "I found it in your maintenance bay. It was sad. Unused. It called to me." "You stole a hoverboard from the maintenance bay?" "I liberated it," she said. "You humans hoard technology like dragons hoard shiny things." Very inefficient. Leo rubbed his face, then squinted at the hoverboard, which had been modified with what looked suspiciously like stabilizers from a drone, and possibly one of his missing toothbrushes. "Did you upgrade it?" "I made it better," Sierra said proudly. "It can now hover through low-gravity corridors, follow voice commands, and sing lullabies in 6 dialects of Cathera." Leo stared. Why would a hoverboard need to sing lullabies? For morale. There was no arguing with that. Over the next few hours, Leo discovered just how thoroughly Sierra had begun adapting to her adopted environment. She had organized his storage closet by subatomic weight. Very logical, very soothing, she insisted, rearranged his data pads by the harmonic pitch of their system fans, and drawn star maps across the underside of his bunk with glow paint. Apparently, the ceiling above his head now depicted the southern hemisphere of her home planet, Tether 9. "It's upside down," Leo had pointed out. "You are upside down," Sierra replied calmly. Later that day, while Leo tried to focus on his data logs and ignore the faint sound of the hoverboard singing a lullaby to itself, Sierra sat cross-legged on the floor with a salvaged toolkit spread out before her, dismantling a military-issued wrist communicator with the gleeful focus of a child disassembling a forbidden toy. "You're going to get us arrested," Leo muttered, tapping his tablet. "I'm going to make you fashionable," Sierra said. "This model is 20 years behind in encryption layers. You could be hacked by a determined hamster." Leo raised a brow. "You've seen a hamster?" "Yes. Terrifying creatures. Great political ambition. They built an empire on Tathar once. Fell apart after the cheese wars." Leo gave up entirely on concentrating. Just then, the station's alert system let out a loud beep. He glanced at the console as a red notification flashed across the screen. "Unidentified signal detected in Sector B7. Protocol. Investigate and report." Leo's heart skipped. Sector B7 was only 2 modules away. Too close for comfort. He immediately straightened up, slapping the hoverboard aside as it tried to follow him like a loyal pet. "Sierra," he said, urgent now. "We've got a scanner ping. Unidentified signal. Could be a sweep drone." She was already moving. With uncanny speed, she darted across the room, tucked the open communicator into her pocket, and ducked into the vent with practiced ease. Her long ears flicked once before vanishing into the darkness. Leo scrambled to make his room look presentable, or at least legal. He shoved glowing soup bowls under the bunk, slammed the console shut, and kicked the modified hoverboard into the closet, where it crooned softly in Catharan until he muted it with a towel. Just in time. A sharp knock came at the door. Then it slid open to reveal Officer Blythe, a stick-thin regulation enforcer whose face was permanently locked in a frown, as though someone had just told him fun was now a capital offense. "Callahan," Blythe said flatly, "explain the power fluctuation coming from your room last night." Leo summoned his most innocent expression. "I microwaved a protein slab with slightly off calibration. I swear it wasn't a rave." Blythe squinted at him, unconvinced. "Maintenance flagged your quarters for irregular energy use. Spikes in ventilation flow, heat signatures in your ceiling ducts, something about an unauthorized AI voice humming lullabies." Leo tried not to sweat. "I like ambiance?" Blythe leaned in. "We've been getting reports of a foreign biosignature aboard the station, unregistered, possibly a stowaway. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Before Leo could answer, something crashed behind him, loud, metallic, and unmistakably Sierra-shaped. Leo whirled around to see his closet door fly open and the hoverboard shoot out like a missile, flailing in midair with a confused Syrah clinging to its top. Blythe's mouth dropped open. "Delivery," Syrah said brightly. "Fresh military-issued ration cubes. For, Callahan's Morale Improvement Program." Leo grabbed the nearest object, a sock, and flung it at the board. "Stay!" he barked. The hoverboard obediently hovered in place. Syrah froze mid-crouch, ears twitching, smile frozen. There was a long silence. Blythe stared, then slowly, wordlessly, turned around and walked out, muttering, "I need a vacation." As the door slid shut, Syrah dismounted with grace, dusted herself off, and grinned. "Morale restored?" Leo collapsed onto his bunk. "You are going to get me airlocked." She settled beside him, folding her legs. "But admit it, it would be so boring without me." He looked at her starlit eyes, her strange gravity, her chaos, and sighed with something that wasn't quite defeat. "Yeah," he muttered, "you're not wrong." Leo had a theory that Syrah wasn't just from another planet. She might have been from another dimension altogether, where rules like gravity, logic, and basic social conventions were more like loose suggestions. Every day she found new and spectacular ways to dismantle what was left of his orderly military life, like a star-eyed wrecking ball. Case in point, breakfast. Leo was half asleep, wearing socks that didn't match, in a shirt that probably belonged to Corporal Jensen, 2 rooms down, when he stumbled into the galley and found Syrah standing on the counter, waving what appeared to be an industrial laser cutter at the ceiling. "What are you doing?" Leo croaked. "Harvesting." She grinned, one foot perched on a crate of emergency rations like a tiny conqueror. "Your station grows edible condensation colonies. Very rare, very expensive." Leo squinted at the damp patch she was vaporizing off the vent. "That's mold, Syrah. That's mold." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Tastes better than your protein bricks." "I feel deeply insulted," Leo muttered, staggering toward the coffee dispenser. He slapped the button and waited for salvation in liquid form. Unfortunately, the dispenser chose that moment to let out a sad mechanical whimper and display an error code that translated loosely to "Give up, mortal." Leo stared at the machine, betrayed. Number, no, not today. Syrah hopped down gracefully, her long ears flicking in amusement. "Your caffeine shrine has been neglected. I shall offer repairs." Before he could protest, she cracked open the side panel with a swift, practiced motion. Wires dangled like wounded soldiers. The scent of burnt circuitry filled the air. Leo felt his soul leave his body in anticipation of disaster. He backed away slowly. "You know what? I'll just... But it was too late. Syrah made a series of rapid adjustments, humming cheerfully in a language Leo couldn't hope to understand, but vaguely suspected involved a lot of words for oops and duck. There was a sharp spark, a whoomp noise, and the entire dispenser lit up. Not exploded. Lit up. Glowing blue lines raced across its surface in intricate patterns. The coffee machine shuddered, coughed once, and then sang. A deep, melodic voice boomed from its speakers. "Good morning, hero of the stars. Would you like your customary beverage of glorious strength?" Leo blinked. Syrah beamed. "I improved it." The dispenser, not waiting for permission, whirred into life and dispensed a perfect cup of coffee. The aroma richer and sweeter than anything Leo had smelled in months. Cautiously, Leo accepted the cup. "If this is a hallucination, I don't want to wake up." He took a sip and nearly wept. It was magnificent, like drinking liquid victory. He turned to Syrah, overwhelmed. You beautiful, chaotic miracle." "I accept praise," she said magnanimously, flipping her hair with a practiced flair. They sat at a battered metal table, Leo nursing his celestial coffee while Syrah nibbled suspiciously at a ration bar she had carefully deconstructed into microscopic layers. "So," Leo said between sips, "I guess we should talk about the tiny, insignificant fact that the station's scanners are actively sweeping for unidentified life forms. You know, like you." Syrah nodded, unbothered. "I have a plan." Leo leaned back warily. "Why does that terrify me?" "You lack vision," she said loftily. "Observe." From the battered canvas bag she kept hidden in the vents, Syrah produced what looked like a very sad rubber chicken, a broken hologram emitter, and a tangle of neon cables. Leo watched, horrified and fascinated, as she assembled them with surgical precision into something. The rubber chicken inflated, its beady eyes flashing an ominous red. The hologram emitter buzzed to life, flickering into the vague outline of a human-shaped figure, tall, official-looking, wearing what might generously be called a uniform. "Behold, Commander Quark," Sira said proudly. Leo squinted. "Your fake ID is a holographic rubber chicken?" "Correct. Commander Quark oversees interstellar sanitation. A very important post. No one wishes to question sanitation officers. They are feared and revered in equal measure." Leo considered this. On one hand, it was absolutely insane. On the other hand, it might just be insane enough to work. No one wanted to anger the sanitation department. Everyone needed them, and no one wanted to talk to them. "You're unbelievable," he said, half laughing, half terrified. "I am adaptable," Sira corrected again, grinning with a flash of sharp teeth. They ran drills all morning. Leo taught Sira how to walk like she belonged, how to mutter under her breath like she was stressed about cleaning quotas, and how to wield a mop with the grim authority of someone who had seen things no one should ever see. Sira, in return, taught Leo how to hack a retinal scanner with a hairpin in a tube of toothpaste. It was oddly fun. For the first time in a long time, Leo felt alive. Not just surviving, not just grinding through the endless, colorless routines of military life, but living. At the end of the day, they slumped side by side against the wall, bruised, laughing, exhausted. "You know," Leo said, staring at the stained ceiling above them, "when I signed up for this assignment, I thought I'd spend a year staring at endless cargo reports and losing card games to grumpy engineers. I didn't expect to be training an alien stowaway in the ancient art of mop diplomacy." "You are welcome," Sira said serenely. Leo laughed again, the sound bouncing off the metal walls. Outside the room, the station thrummed with its usual subdued chaos. Life support systems hissed, engines hummed, and unseen drones zipped through the maintenance tunnels, oblivious to the strange little revolution brewing quietly in room 17A. Leo leaned his head back against the wall, sipping the last of his coffee, and thought, maybe for the first time, that he didn't mind the chaos at all. Maybe, just maybe, he needed it. The next morning began with Leo waking up to a six-legged cleaning bot repeatedly ramming its head into the side of his bunk. "Cease," he groaned, tossing a sock at it. The bot paused, reversed, then politely rammed itself into his shin instead. Sira, perched upside down from the overhead lighting rig, like some sort of elegant, long-eared space gargoyle, watched with interest. "It's attempting to assert dominance. You've failed the territorial challenge." Leo batted it away and sat up groggy. "Remind me again why you're hanging from the ceiling?" "I was recalibrating the photonic ballast alignment nodes," she said cheerfully, "but now I'm just vibing." As Leo rubbed his eyes and tried to coax his brain into operational status, the room's light flickered briefly, a subtle shimmer that passed like a ripple over the walls. "Power flux?" he asked. Sira dropped to the floor soundlessly. "Not exactly. More like someone scanning. High-frequency quantum lattice pattern. Military grade. Subtle. Sneaky. Rude." Leo stiffened. "How close?" "Close enough," she replied, peering at a device she'd cobbled together from an old wrist pad, a singing toothbrush, and what Leo suspected had once been part of his microwave. "They're sweeping compartments, floor by floor. Someone suspicious." Leo cursed under his breath. "Great, just great. We finally taught you how to pretend to be a janitor, and now the station decides to get paranoid." "I told you," Sira said, twirling one of her long ears like a ribbon. "I emit a minor subdimensional echo. Very rare, very charming, very detectable if you're trying hard enough." Leo paced. "If they pick up a signal in this room, we're toast. And not the good kind of toast. The overcooked kind with military punishment sauce." Sira considered. "Time to implement Operation Inconveniently Timed Plumbing Emergency." Leo paused. "That is not a real operation." "It is now," she said, already vanishing into the wall panel. Moments later, a klaxon sounded. A strange, wet gurgle followed by a station-wide announcement in a bored robotic voice. "Warning, level 3. Sanitation anomaly detected in section Gamma 3. Hazard index, sloshy. From somewhere deep in the ductwork, Sierra's delighted giggle echoed. Leo sighed and grabbed his boots. If I end up knee-deep in alien jelly, I'm transferring to an asteroid mining shift. The plumbing chaos, courtesy of Sierra rerouting a water recycling loop through a decommissioned cryo-storage bay, gave them just enough cover to reroute surveillance feeds and delay the scan. For now. Back in the safety of room 17A, Leo flopped onto his bunk while Sierra poked around in a crate of salvaged junk, humming to herself. "Tell me about your world," Leo said after a moment, surprising even himself. Sierra looked up. He shrugged. "We've spent all this time pretending you're a sanitation officer and a hoverboard mechanic. I figure maybe I should get to know the actual you." She tilted her head, studying him with those strange, star-speckled eyes. "No one on your station has asked that." "Well, they haven't met the real you," he said. "Just the chaos." She smiled faintly. "Tethar 9 is warm. Mostly oceans. The cities hover, anti-grav pylons anchored into the crust. Everything's always shifting. You learn not to build anything permanent. Even names. I've had 3. Leo blinked. "You had 3 names?" "4 if you count the one I made up for a scam involving jellyfish currency." She grinned. "My people live long, very long. We adapt or vanish." He sat up. "Why were you on the human border station? You never told me how you ended up here." Sierra's smile faded slightly. "Because I was looking for somewhere different. Somewhere slower, less grand, less scripted. I grew tired of everything being predetermined." Leo nodded, quiet. He understood that. Maybe not in scale, but in shape. The predictability of military life had once been a comfort. Now it just felt like being filed away in a drawer labeled background character. "Funny," he said. "You were looking for slower, and you ended up in my room." She laughed. "The universe has a sense of humor." They sat in companionable silence for a while, until the door chimed. Leo froze. "Not expecting anyone?" Sierra asked lightly. He shook his head and motioned for her to hide. She vanished behind the storage unit in a blur. The door slid open. This time it wasn't Officer Blythe, thankfully, but someone worse in a different way. Lieutenant Thorne, Leo's direct superior. A woman who looked like she could win a staring contest with a photon cannon. "Callahan," she said, striding in like she owned the floor beneath his boots. "We've received irregular data transmissions from this sector. Any idea why?" Leo scrambled for his most convincingly clueless expression. "Data transmissions? From me?" Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Yes, your comm signature lit up at 0300 with a burst of encrypted frequency chatter. Untraceable origin point. Possibly black market tech." Leo blinked. "Ah, that would be my sleep talking?" She didn't laugh. Leo laughed nervously. "No? Just me? Okay." Thorne scanned the room. Her eyes lingered on the humming hoverboard in the corner, the faint scent of alien coffee, the suspicious lack of dust. "You've been cleaning," she said slowly. Leo nodded. "Personal growth." Thorne's eyes narrowed. From behind the storage unit came a sudden, panicked chirp. Thorne's hand went to her sidearm. Leo sprang into action. "Rats! Storage unit rats! Terrible infestation, huge problem. Very private issue. Bit me once. Had to get a tetanus booster." Thorne hesitated. "Also, they sing," Leo added desperately. The unit chirped again. A warbling tune that sounded suspiciously like a lullaby sung by a very embarrassed alien trying to pretend to be a rodent. After a long pause, Thorne sighed. "Get pest control and keep your transmissions clean." "Yes, ma'am." She turned and left without another word. Sierra emerged from the unit, red in the face. "I panicked and reverted to a nesting call. We do that when threatened." Leo was still laughing 10 minutes later. It was official. Leo's life had become an absurd blend of clandestine alien babysitting, advanced mop tactics, and increasingly creative lying. His past self, the straight-laced cadet who used to color-code his ration packs, would have fainted dead away. Now Leo just shrugged into his half-button uniform, sipped his contraband alien coffee, and considered how best to hide a 7-foot-tall aquatic tank Syrah had somehow assembled in the middle of his room overnight. "Explain," he said simply, staring at the softly bubbling monstrosity. Syrah, perched daintily atop the tank's rim like a queen surveying her neon kingdom, smiled brightly. "We needed a distraction." Leo pinched the bridge of his nose. "Syrah, that is not a distraction. That is evidence." "It's art," she corrected. "Also, it's alive." Leo stumbled backward. "It's what?" As if on cue, a small, translucent creature floated up from the depths of the tank, waving stubby tentacles at him like an excited puppy made of bubblegum and existential dread. "I named him Globber," Syrah said proudly. Leo stared into Globber's huge, soulful eyes. Globber burbled happily, ejecting a stream of glittering particles that immediately fused into a floating geometric shape, resembling a lopsided cube. Leo turned slowly back to Syrah. "This thing is going to get me court-martialed." Syrah nodded sympathetically. "And yet, so cute." There was a soft chime, the alert for approaching patrols. Leo's chest tightened. "Quick," Syrah said, hopping down. "New plan. We claim this is a mental health support organism. Part of your therapy." "My therapy?" "Clearly, you're under emotional duress from working in a high-stress, bureaucratic environment populated by humorless authority figures." She shrugged. "I read your station handbook," Leo spluttered. "You can't just invent therapy animals." Syrah patted Globber gently. "I assure you, on Tathar the Ninth, emotional support cephalopods are a legitimate field." Leo groaned. It didn't matter anymore. His fate was sealed. Either the station's security officers would bust him for harboring a fugitive in an illegal alien life form, or he'd be thrown into psychiatric evaluation for bonding with an interdimensional jellybean. A sharp knock rattled the door. Leo and Syrah both jumped. Syrah gave him a confident thumbs up and dove behind the tank, her long ears barely vanishing in time. Leo opened the door to find Officer Blythe standing there, tablet in hand, wearing the permanent expression of a man one wrong sneeze away from despair. "Callahan," Blythe said, voice weary. "Routine inspection. Randomly selected. Lucky you." Leo smiled so hard his face hurt. "Lucky me." Blythe stepped inside, scanning with professional disinterest, until his eyes snagged on the glowing tank and its proudly burbling inhabitant. The silence stretched. Somewhere behind the tank, Syrah audibly tried to suppress a sneeze. Blythe blinked. "Is that part of your duties?" "Therapy," Leo said firmly. "Therapy," Blythe repeated like the word personally offended him. "Yup, issued by Central Command," Leo lied with the smoothness of a man who had lost the ability to care. "Regulation 42-D, subsection B, optional morale-boosting companion units for personnel experiencing moderate to extreme existential crises." Blythe hesitated. Leo could almost see the man mentally flipping through the endless, ridiculous regulations that had been dumped onto the station after the last morale scandal, when the medical bay had briefly been converted into a knitting circle. Finally, Blythe exhaled. "Fine. Log it officially. No unauthorized breeding." Leo nodded, utterly solemn. "Wouldn't dream of it." As soon as the door closed behind him, Leo slumped against it. Syrah emerged, triumphant, tossing a handful of shimmering particles into the air like celebratory confetti. "We live another day," she declared. Leo shot her a look. "You know this can't keep up forever. They're going to notice eventually." Syrah's expression softened. "Then we'll think of something better." For a moment, Leo was struck by how fearless she was, not in the reckless way that came from not understanding danger, but in the stubborn, bright-eyed way that said, "I see it, and I choose to dance anyway." He envied her, deeply. Globber floated lazily between them, making a noise like a cosmic hiccup. It somehow felt reassuring. That night, as Leo lay awake under the low hum of the station's life support systems, he found himself thinking about the future, about how, day by day, Syrah had turned his tiny world upside down, about how somehow, in the vast cold machinery of space, in the endless routines of an anonymous life, something extraordinary had found its way to him, and how much he didn't want to lose it. Meanwhile, in the maintenance shafts above them, a small surveillance drone zipped past, its tiny sensors flickering. A half-second later, it exploded into harmless glitter. Sierra smiled in her sleep, one hand resting on a glowing cube tucked under her pillow. Leo Callahan had faced a lot of strange things since joining the Stellar Corps. Meteor showers that sang in ultrasonic choirs, quantum malfunctions that turned the mess hall's spaghetti into self-aware philosophical beings, and once, very memorably, an officer's briefing conducted entirely in mime because of a translator virus. But nothing compared to what he was facing now, a tribunal. Technically, it was a review committee for environmental anomalies and behavioral deviations. But Leo knew a tribunal when he saw one. 3 grim-faced officers sat behind a polished metal table, with Leo standing alone before them, like a particularly guilty potted plant. Behind him, carefully hidden in a ventilation shaft, Sierra was pressed up against the grill, watching with unblinking intensity. Glauber floated loyally in a makeshift backpack, occasionally sticking a tentacle out to comfort pat Leo's back. Commander Vance, who looked like she personally detested anything that sparkled, leaned forward. Corporal Callahan, your sector has experienced 57 separate breaches of standard station protocol in the last 30 days. Explain. Leo inhaled, thought about it, exhaled. My therapy animal is extremely enthusiastic, he said at last. There was a long silence. Commander Vance tapped her stylus so hard against the table that Leo thought she might bore a hole straight through to the reactor core. Another officer, a tall, silver-haired man with the air of someone who secretly wanted to be anywhere else, sighed. And the quantum lattice disturbances? Glauber has big emotions, Leo said solemnly. Sometimes they leak. Vance stared at him like she could taste the nonsense on the air. And the unauthorized modifications to station plumbing? Hydration is very important, Leo said immediately, especially in high-stress environments. And the musical infestation in the maintenance ducts? Morale boosting. And the spontaneous creation of a subdimensional fish market on Deck 9? Leo hesitated. Economic stimulation? There was a crack, a snort of laughter hastily disguised as a cough from the silver-haired officer. Vance's glare could have melted titanium. At that moment, the ventilation grate popped free with a musical twang, and Sierra tumbled gracelessly out onto the floor, landing in a tangle of long limbs and even longer ears. Glauber floated serenely after her, blowing a triumphant raspberry. The tribunal froze. Leo froze. Sierra, upside down, waved cheerfully. Hello, minor government officials. I come in peace. For one heartbeat-long moment, the universe held its breath. Then all hell broke loose. Security alarms blared. Officers leapt up, fumbling for stun batons. Someone screamed in a very undignified manner. Sierra, still sprawled on the floor, raised her hands. I am legally a diplomatic entity under the Interstellar Hospitality Act, subsection 17G. Leo had no idea if that was real, but he decided to bet everything on it. He threw himself in front of her like a living shield. She's not a threat. She's seeking asylum. Vance's face twisted. You expect us to believe? I can prove it, Leo said desperately. She fixed our life support systems last week when they glitched during the meteor belt transit. She helped stabilize Deck 6 when the gravitics overloaded. She even taught the sanitation bots how to stop attacking enlisted personnel. One of the younger officers nodded thoughtfully. My mop hasn't tried to strangle me in days, Vance hissed. Irrelevant. She's an unauthorized alien presence. Sierra got to her feet gracefully, brushing imaginary dust from her uniform. A patchwork creation of scavenged station gear, human jackets, and bits of glittery alien fabric. She smiled, soft but fierce. I didn't come here to spy, she said, or to fight. I just didn't want to be alone anymore. Her voice, melodic and strangely deep, carried in the high-arched tribunal chamber. Even the alarm seemed to soften into a background hum. I found a place where, for the first time, I wasn't being judged for what I was supposed to become. I could just be. The silver-haired officer leaned forward. You mean here? On this rust bucket station? Leo turned towards Sierra, feeling something loosen in his chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. She found us, found me. Commander Vance opened her mouth, no doubt to unleash some regulations so cold it could freeze suns. But the tribunal room door slammed open instead. In walked Station Commander Rourke, a mountain of a man with a cybernetic arm, a collection of improbable facial scars, and an expression of perpetual disinterest. "What's the ruckus?" he demanded. Vance saluted sharply. "Sir, unauthorized alien entity." Rourke squinted at Sierra, then at Glauber, who blew him a bubble shaped vaguely like a thumbs up. He grunted, "Huh." Another bubble. This one had tiny sparkles shaped like coffee cups. Rourke nodded once, thoughtfully. "Well, morale's up 15%, maintenance reports down by 20, and the last 3 officer incidents all involved musical therapy programs." Vance floundered. "But the protocols are important," Rourke said gruffly, "but so's a functioning crew." He turned to Leo. "You vouch for them?" Leo straightened. "I do." Rourke jerked his head. "Then it's settled. Temporary diplomatic guest status. Official morale officer." Sierra beamed so brightly it was like having an extra sun in the room. Glauber did a victory lap, showering the tribunal in harmless glitter. Vance looked like she might combust. Leo turned towards Sierra, heart thudding hard but light too, lighter than it had been in years. "We did it," he whispered. She grinned. "Told you. Operation. Inconveniently timed plumbing emergency always works." They laughed. Full-throated, free laughter, even as the tribunal dissolved into chaos around them. Later, back in room 17A, now technically classified as Diplomatic Suite 17A, Leo flopped onto his bunk with a sigh of deep, exhausted relief. Sierra sprawled beside him, Glauber perching proudly on the bunk's edge like a victorious jelly bean. "So," Leo said, "what now?" Sierra tilted her head, ears twitching slightly. "Now we live," Leo grinned. "Sounds revolutionary." "In some cultures it is," she said seriously. And as the station drifted silently through the void, carrying with it a mismatched crew of misfits, dreamers, and now a long-eared alien woman with a heart as vast as the stars, Leo felt for the first time in a long while like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Home wasn't always a place. Sometimes it was a room with a broken light panel, a stubborn hoverboard, a diplomatic jellyfish, and a girl who refused to leave. And that was just perfect.